And welcome to another week of Sports Chat.
We are here in the wonderful Papa John's studios with great pizza, breadsticks, drinks.
Of course, they also have great wings, cookies, other chicken things.
Come to Papa John's, you leave satisfied.
It's been a big week in sports yet again. It's like there was a bunch of drunken monkeys drawing names out of the hat, and we call that the Vols selection committees.
Yeah, they often get off track. I'm, of course, particularly unhappy with that Auburn has managed to back into the SEC championship, or into the BCS title game. I do not like SEC teams winning national championships. I don't. I'm not a go SEC guy. It does nothing for Tennessee when they win those games. I hope Florida State wins. I'm also not a bandwagon jumper, but I'm all for what helps Tennessee, and I feel Florida State winning helps Tennessee the most.
It was one of those weird situations. I didn't want to see Auburn get in, but at the same time, I didn't want to see Ohio State get in.
I don't like Ohio State, but our fortunes are much more closely tied to what Auburn does in the future than what Ohio State does in the future. So I would have been fine with Ohio State getting in. I figured Florida State would have slaughtered them. But Auburn, they won the national championship, immediately in the number one recruiting class. And it was pretty much recruited to fit Gus Malzahn's system. He was gone for a year. They were terrible. The coach got fired. He comes back in the national championship game again. I'll give it hats off to Mason, their running back. My God, 300 yards. He had 168 against Alabama and then 300 against Missouri. That's the top two defenses in the SEC. So Florida State's going to have its hands full. Hopefully they can win. A better Florida State program means a worse program in Gainesville. That helps. So I'm always for a worse program in Gainesville. Auburn being good doesn't seem to impede Alabama at all. So them being good does us no good. It just means that there's another team better than us in the SEC.
I think it probably impedes Georgia a little bit.
Well, that helps us if it actually does impede Georgia. But I don't like everything that happened, as far as the SEC getting back in it. I know a lot of people are go SEC. It just, like I say, it does us no good at all to see that. We did get a big commitment this week. The big defensive tackle was named Charles Mosby, I think.
I just followed him on Twitter.
6'5", 353 pounds. If he's got any kind of wind at all, hopefully I would rather play. 6'5" is pretty tall for a defensive tackle, but we've had taller ones. But 353, that's a heavy load to push out of there. I would rather be about 6'2" and 350 if he has wind. Daniel McCullers had decent wind by his second year here. McCullers never did quite have the speed that a big John Henderson or Albert Haynesworth had. So he didn't make quite the impact, but he was a good player, and hopefully this guy's going to be good because we need defensive line.
Right, and we had, of course, a little bit of a blow to the offensive line this week when, not unexpectedly, Tiny Richardson did say he was indeed going to the draft.
You got to do what you can for your family. I can't blame anybody. He suffered through three of the worst years of football that you could ever have suffered through if you ever attended Tennessee. I mean, the last class that had this much trouble was the class of 1904. When 1904 through 1906 we had this bad of a record. So it's not something you see here often, but he'll always be a Vol, and he gave it his all.
And I'm sure when people say, where'd you play ball? You go, if you want to play good ball, you go play at Tennessee.
Yeah, any better we get in the NFL eventually helps us out. The schools, teams, players in the NFL win at a high level. Since the draft started, Tennessee has more players drafted than any other school. Around that time, you could look for, it's been 70 years or so, maybe a little more than that, maybe 80 now, but Tennessee is number one or number two in all-time in wins and winning percentage since then. Even with our current bad trend going on, we're still in the top 2 or 3 in wins and winning percentage over that span. You have players that can go to the NFL, you're going to win a lot of games in college. And that's what Bus Jones, with this recruiting class, just by looking at it, to me, there's probably 7 or 8 kids in it that are very strong bets to be in the NFL.
Todd Kelly Jr. looked like a world beater in the state title game.
He won the state player of the year, the Gatorade player of the year for Tennessee. He had a great season.
And kudos to Webb. I mean, they're actually a really good, classy program.
Tennessee is piling up commitments this year, way over what appears the rules apply, but there were some new exceptions to the rules put in. I was reading this today about how you can count kids now. And NCAA may close the loophole after this year, but it's in the rules. They can actually recruit kids this year, have them not report to classes until August the 1st. And not officially give them a scholarship on August the 1st and have the kids sign then. And they count for the 2015 class instead of the 2014 class. So you can do that. That's where some of them are going to go. There's some speculation that some of our more wealthy recruits, because I think we have 6 recruits this year whose parents or siblings play in the NFL.
Like Dylan Bates,
Todd Kelly Jr., because apparently Todd Kelly not only had an NFL career, but he's done really well in business after that. Now, I'm not saying that that's for sure going to happen, but there's been some speculation that some of those kids may play their own way. I mean, if I were a Tennessee coach, I would never ask him to do that.
But you get a Vol for life like Bill Bates,
Yeah.
and you think he's probably more than willing to do that.
He may do that. I mean, I wouldn't ask him as a coach. If they said they would be willing to do it, I would let them, obviously. But, I mean, their kids have played well enough to earn a scholarship anywhere in the country. The Berry twins have played well enough to earn a scholarship anywhere in the country. I mean, Eric, of course, has got a lot of money, and he does love Tennessee, and he is a volunteer for life, and one of the best players we have in the NFL right now. But I would not ask him to pay, but if they were willing to, you don't turn that down, especially when you're trying to rebuild the program. But it looks like we're going to sign or have commitments from, because I say they may sign some in August, 35 or 36 kids, and that's probably going to get the SEC and the NCAA in a tizzy, but it's within their rule structure right now.
One of the things you have to do is learn to play around what the rules allow you to do, and especially if you're in desperation rebuilding mode. I would almost call us in desperation rebuilding mode.
Oh, God, desperately need depth in players. And it may affect the 2015 class a little bit if that's what they end up doing with these kids. I think 9 of them can count towards 2013 because our roster, we only had about 65 scholarship players, so we had about 23 scholarships, or maybe 18 because I think we may have lost a couple for the Lane Kiffin hostess thing. But still, you can count back 9. I think you normally have 25 available in a year. You're allowed to sign 25 kids between December 1st and May 31st. So we can back count the 9 and then sign the 25 new ones, the letters of intent on the signing day. And then, like I say, either get some people to pay their own way, or the term they're using now is blue shirt instead of gray shirt, where you sign August the 1st and become a scholarship eligible immediately when football season starts. But it counts towards 2015. But we need the depth and we need the talent now. We need to start, the quicker you get them in here and the quicker you start building it up. I say even if it means a short class for 2015. And right now we have all this recruiting momentum. It's not like we're taking bad players. Right.
I mean, Jalen Hurd was a 5-star recruit. So they've lowered him because of the injury. The kid, the receiver they just signed the other day is a 5-star kid.
Yeah, they're essentially. I don't put a lot of stock in the star system because 5 and 4 stars intermingle pretty closely, and there's very little difference in a lot of them. They're consensus. There's a consensus ranking though of them in the top 100, which usually works out pretty well.
Right. I mean, it's just that Todd Kelly Jr. If you watched that web title game at all, he was head and shoulders above everybody else.
I think he had around 200 yards rushing. Plus, he plays pretty good defense. Hurd, I cannot believe his number. I will not believe that he actually runs a 4.37 40. I mean, there's one player in the NFL that has his size that runs that, and that's Antonio Gates. That ever ran that, and that was Antonio Gates. And I really hope that Hurd really does it. That would mean he's one of the best athletes who's ever played at Tennessee. I expect that instead of a 4.37 40 though, at 6'3" and 240, he's probably closer to 4.5-ish, which is still very good for a running back. He's a big, powerful back like Eddie George. Eddie George ran a 4.5 40, and Eddie George won the Heisman Trophy at Ohio State, I believe. Led them to some bunch of good seasons. Got clobbered by Bill Duff on the goal line. Couldn't score, and Tennessee won the Citrus Bowl.
But went on to have a really good NFL career.
He ended up being one of the top 15 or so running backs in NFL history, yardage-wise. He's very durable. Hurd's a big kid like that. I thought that Hurd may move to defensive end, but he may stick at running back. If I were Hurd, I mean, he probably doesn't look at it this way. I would want to be a defensive end.
Yeah.
You're a defensive end, if you're that big with that kind of speed, you get a lot more money than running backs do. I mean, you don't see running backs right now getting signed to giant contracts. you see a Julius Peppers from a few years ago getting a big contract, or DeMarcus Ware from the Cowboys. Those speed rushing defensive ends are very valued in the NFL. That's what I would rather play. That's why I never understood why Jason Witten. I mean, obviously it worked out great for Jason Witten to play a tight end, and he's been above average compared to what most of them did, but he still would have made more money as a defensive end. Maybe he wouldn't have been as happy, though. But running backs, you take a punishing beating, your careers are short, and you don't get paid as much. And you rarely ever see running backs drafted in the top 20 picks in the draft anymore.
Right, the draft dynamic has changed to where defense is king.
Yeah,
A good quarterback.
a good quarterback is going to go in the top 5 if he's truly great. Otherwise, you're looking at defensive tackles are the next priority. Great offensive linemen are a high priority. Defensive ends that can rush, speed rushing ends. Cover cornerbacks are really highly prized. That's where your NFL draft, that's where your big money comes in the NFL, if you can do those things. Anybody can run the ball. I mean, not really anybody, but there's a lot of players who can play running back.
And there's a lot of teams that do running back by committee.
And you see people come out of the 4th, 5th, 6th round at running back all the time and excel. But you don't see many defensive tackles. I mean, we talk about Chris behind the camera a lot every week being a Bears fan. He can attest better than anybody that once your Pro Bowl defensive tackle goes in like Henry Melton did for the Bears this year, your defense gets a lot worse really quickly, and you really can't do anything to fill that spot in. Defensive linemen are valuable.
Right, I mean, you can't just go find that retired defensive lineman and bring him back.
No, I mean, there's running backs out there everywhere. There's not defensive linemen. There's not speed rushers. So if I were Jalen Hurd and I really ran in at 4.4, 4.5 40 at 6'3" and 240 pounds, I would try to get up to 260, get my speed at 4.5, and I would rush off the end all day long and let them pay me $20 million. Well, not 20. You get paid $12, $15, $16 million a year for doing that in the NFL. That's just me. But maybe he can help Tennessee at running back. We had decent production this year from what I consider not really a great running back in Neal. He often danced a bit too much for me. I thought Marlon Lane hit the holes better, but for some reason Marlon Lane didn't play much, so he must have been doing something bad in practice.
Yeah, and Neal, he's an average running back. I mean, not terrible, but like you said, he just too much song and dance on his part.
One of the big things here at Tennessee, since I can remember, when I was a kid, the first running back I remember was Johnny Jones in the early 80s, and he was great, and we just kept having really good running back after really good running back.
Well, you look at the real glory years when on the same team you had Jamal Lewis, Travis Henry, Travis Stevens,
Sean Bryson.
and Sean Bryson, who was just a phenomenal pass-catching fullback.
We had 4 running backs who went on to play in the NFL. 3 of them started. Our fullback was a starting running back in the NFL at one point. That's just unheard of for a team. And the years before they got here, you had Jay Graham, Charlie Garner,
The cobweb offense.
James Stewart, all on the same team, who all 3 went and played in the NFL. So you had Reggie Cobb and Chuck Webb. Chuck Webb was the best running back who's ever played at Tennessee. Tore out his ACL against Pacific. That was a bad day. I can remember.
I was at that game.
We beat Pacific 56-0, but that cost us the national championship that year. I really feel. Tennessee tied the eventual national champion that year. But I believe with Chuck Webb, we would have won the national championship that year. And he just tore out his ACL against Pacific. That was that, and he never recovered from it. Cobb, of course, got involved in drugs, and he still went to Minnesota and did okay for Minnesota. But by gosh, in college, I say it's a 30-year run of great running backs, and then suddenly, really after the Cedric Houston, Gerald Riggs dual 1,000-yard seasons, it kind of fell apart for Tennessee, and they've been searching for that great running back ever since then. I would love to see Hurd fit the bill, but who knows if he will. And if he really runs a 4.37, look
Is
at
that big?
Look, he'll win the Heisman Trophy here. That's like Herschel Walker, but even bigger.
And UT also this week, they had a very, very pedestrian first half of basketball against Tennessee Tech before coming back to win.
Apparently it's the Conzo Martin way that you start the season slow and you start games slow. They got a big game against Wichita State this week, and that's really one of three probably NCAA tournament teams they're going to face out of conference this year, and it would be great to get a win out there. I don't know if they can or not. They have the physical capability of doing it. And the offense for Tennessee is actually being very highly efficient this year. They're ranked in the top 20 in almost every efficiency category on offense. It's just the defense doesn't come and play. I mean, Conzo Martin is heralded as a defensive guru, and you play the Martin way, it's supposed to be hard-nosed defense, but you look at the stats back even when he was at Missouri State, his teams didn't play good defense there, and they just gave Tennessee Tech wide-open shots all first half long. I thought Bart Bertelkamp was going to have a stroke. Listened to him on the radio while I was on my way up to the parade planning area, and Tennessee was just giving up wide-open shots, and Tennessee Tech was making them. You give up wide-open shots to college-level athletes, they're going to make most of them. You can watch them in practice. They'll sit there and hit three-pointers all day long with nobody guarding them. And that's the problem. Tennessee doesn't put out defensive effort all the time, and I don't know why.
The whole Conzo Martin way, I don't know about it. But
I'm not real clear on why that commentators insist on saying that every week and insist that he is doing this, hard-nosed defensive work. It just doesn't happen. It never shows up in the stats. There's no, we had some ugly games last year where we only, each team scored in the 30s, and we played Virginia again. Now, Virginia's defense, in that game we had last year, I think we lost 37-36. Around the same time we lost that 39-38 game to Georgetown. Virginia's defense is second in the country in defensive efficiency. And we played them pretty soon, too. We'll see if we can score against them. It'll be the clash of our offense against their defense. And that's another team that's probably going to project to make the NCAA tournament. We need that win. It's in Knoxville this year. You can't lose home games this year because the SEC is terrible. We saw last year Tennessee was 20-11 and could not make the NCAA tournament at 20-11 after the SEC tournament because the SEC is bad. The SEC has no wins over top 10 teams yet. Kentucky, which much to my joy is getting beat every time they play a really good team. My God, Rups Raptors was in just complete panic, death mode. It's the greatest thing to ever do. When Kentucky loses the basketball game, go to Rups Raptors. Just Google Rups Raptors. It's catspaws.com or something terrible like that. And they're in complete blue meltdown. All summer long, they got that recruiting class with 7 potential NBA first-round picks in it. I saw 40-0. 40-0. We're going 40-0 next year. We will not lose a game. It won't be close. They look kind of pedestrian. Those Harrison twins don't look that great. They apparently, one thread I saw on there, one of them said one of the Harrison twins, he's convinced, flipped off John Calipari after Calipari gave him a stern look for taking a bad shot. They said he was giving it the old nose rub. And I don't know, of course, the other Kentucky fans immediately decried him as a Louisville fan, even though he had like 10,000 posts on the board and 12 years of seniority. But anytime you say something bad, they declare you either a Louisville or a Tennessee fan, and not a true Kentucky fan. They think people go in there and sit for years.
Just waiting on that perfect moment.
Praising the Wildcats for years just to wait on that perfect moment to pounce and start trouble. So they ban you immediately. I've been banned from all their boards. Not as any kind of Kentucky fan, just as one. You can point out a fact to them. And it's something indisputable, like you can say, this team went 25-5 this year. And if it doesn't fit their agenda, they ban you for it. Which they're rotten jackals. That's the way Kentucky Wildcat fans are.
On the upside of basketball, Cougars picked up 2 big wins Friday night.
Yeah, the Cougars are coming around. We had an interview with Ryan Browning that you can probably find here on the Volunteer Times YouTube page when you're seeing this. Just look for it. Coach Browning's got the girls turned around a little bit.
All things being equal, he should be our guest next week.
Yeah, him and hopefully a couple of the players will be able to make it down next Monday.
Of course, we've tried to get Coach Housley, but he's got a lot of personal commitment going on right now as he has a newborn.
Congratulations to him and Jessica, the newest member of the Cougar Nation, welcomed on board.
Genetically, that kid should wind up a great basketball player.
You would think so.
Because Jessica's one of the top 5 girls that ever played there. And Matt, one could argue, is one of the top 5 or so guys that have played there.
Yeah, maybe it won't.
I imagine the Price twins are just salivating, hoping it turns into a football player.
You would like to think so, but I'm sure it'll be a good athlete at some point in time. Who knows where it'll still be at that time?
True.
Who knows? Campbell County will have a school with him. They probably will. That's something I'm sure that right now Coach House is more worried about changing diapers.
That's very true.
About getting him out for football or basketball.
Now I heard he had quite the time in the delivery room that he had 4 almost blackouts.
You know, Jessica's pretty mean. I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't try to punch him.
Oh, I'm sure she did. I mean, she can't be nice like the rest of her sisters.
No, I remember she hated you at one point.
She's kind of rotten that way.
The good things are happening up there. The boys are starting to get the football players worked in. It's getting a little bit more healthy. I think Dallas Griffith still probably has some time to go.
He's got some ankle issues right now too.
Trey Torres had sprained his ankle pretty badly and is just now starting to get over it.
Darren Gillenwater is money right now.
Gillenwater, I mean, he's one of the best pure shooters I saw up there in a long time. And he just comes down, and if he's within 28 feet, he's ready to shoot. And he seems to be making a pretty high percentage. I might say at least 40, 45% of his threes, which is great. If you can shoot 33% from the field and three-pointers, your effective field goal percentage is 50%. And that's good for any kind of guard. And he's higher than that, I'm sure. And he has those nights where he'll hit 7 or 8 three-pointers pretty quickly and scores 25 or 30 a game.
On the girls' side, Hannah Owens is back on the court. And she's a difference maker.
And Coach Browning pointed out that he feels his team is just getting more used to playing with each other right now and getting more used to him right now. Because he had to, of course, he's been cycling in a lot of new players. And you got Hannah out there, and I think it's Brooke Bain. He said he's playing well. And Kendra King is doing well this year. And just he got several players that are stepping up, starting to hit their shots.
A lot of them had a great JV season last year.
They had a big win over Central, and then that big win against Gibbs. And are they 2-0 in the district now?
No, they lost to Anderson County.
Okay, they're 2-1 in the district then, I believe. And they're out to they're getting things under control now. And I like to, sure, Browning, he's a really good coach. Always does well with them. And I said Matt House is the same. I think that both the Cougars teams are going to compete pretty decently in the district this year.
Right, and they've got just I think one more home game until after New Year's.
Yeah, I think possibly Friday night they play, and unless it's tomorrow. Is it tomorrow night they play?
No, I think it's Friday.
I think it is one of the two. Which by the time you see this,
Either way, yeah.
It's either Tuesday or Friday, but probably Friday night.
Thursday night is, of course, one of the 2 annual basketball meetings between the Eagles and the Owls. So that's your chance to see the future of Cougar basketball.
They made a deep run last year. The Eagles did into the middle school tournament, played basically for the East Tennessee section of the equivalent of state championship for middle school.
And Cody Parker does a great job with that team, and he's got some excellent help around him too. Chris Smith and Bo Vincent.
There's a reason Cody is the most popular Parker brother. He really, gets out, kisses the baby, shakes the hands. You would think he'd be the politician of the family, but I think Josh probably benefits from Cody being so great.
Oh, I would think so for sure.
People give it associated greatness to Josh.
Absolutely.
And Josh is a pretty good sports information director. I wish he would give me those Cougar records, though.
Yeah, one of these days we'll get those. And on the outside, Michael Kane has really and he was a pretty good little ball player himself in high school. I almost tried to blind him with a laser pointer. He was Bell's cousin. But no, Michael's a good coach. His brother helps him out, and that LaFollette team should have a pretty good run this year too.
I would think so. LaFollette traditionally always is pretty much a basketball contender. Losing Dallas Griffith hurt because he's that good of a player. It's tough to overcome that, but he's on his way to getting people cycled in. That's in middle school. You have a quick turnover, and you have to get used to that as a coach. By the time your player starts to get good, it's time for him to go into high school because you only have a couple of years really with him. But I guess
that should wrap it up for
that'll
today.
about wrap it up tonight from the Papa John studio here.